Hi, in this video we're going to look at a continuation of the third part of the Always On series, and we're going to complete the series with basically the remaining tasks as far as Always On is concerned. Mainly this includes looking at some of the Always On DMVs to understand exactly how to monitor an Always On solution, as well as a look at the dashboard, how to use the listener group, and how to perform a manual failover. In the first part of the series, we looked at the fundamental idea between Always On and other high availability solutions like clustering, mirroring, and replication. And we saw how Always On has the advantages of all these three different mechanisms without any of their significant disadvantages. In the second half of the series, or in the second part of the series, we looked at how you can go ahead and configure or set up Always On and use Always On for creating replication, not replication, but basically Always On availability groups between two different replicas who are connected to a failover cluster. In this part of the series, let's go ahead first look at some of the common DMVs that you're likely to use as part of Always On, and after that we'll go ahead and look at the dashboard and wind up the series with the manual failover. So as you can see here, I've already got some of the DMVs listed. One of the more frequent DMVs that you're likely to use include the database replica states, the replica states themselves of the replicas, and again the cluster member group, things like that. But here are a couple of other ones that you're really going to be interested in. Now, because Always On has synchronous replication or synchronous data movement between different replicas, it can actually go ahead and do automatic page repair, where if the primary or any of the other environments have a database corruption because of hard disk related issues, then it can easily go ahead, identify those issues, and take the corresponding page from any of the other online replicas. This allows you to go ahead and run DBCC checkDB and some of the other DBCC consistency checks that we have within SQL Server less frequently, because with this particular option now available, there is a good chance that you would always go ahead and have page repair happening automatically without really having to do a large amount of checks in the background. Especially this could be useful if you're dealing with very large databases, at which point usually running DBCC checkDB does put a good amount of stress on the hardware. So if you look at it again, you can see pretty much similar stuff that we've always been seeing with DBCC checkDB. So you've got the database ID, the file ID, and the page ID, as well as the page status and the different types of error codes associated with it. The next thing you might be interested in looking at is the high availability DR group states. Now this is again, I've got one availability group at the moment, and it's on node 1, which is the primary, and as you can see it's online, so everything is good. Synchronization health status is also healthy, so that's a good thing to know. Usually you want to go ahead and monitor this first to make sure that everything is up and running. If you ever find an issue here, then you might need to drill down into some of the other DMVs to find out exactly what's going on. You've also got some basic IDs associated with the different groups, so you can see they're all unique identifiers. Again, for the most part, you can go ahead and just look these things up when you need it, and they're not really going to be very practically useful from a monitoring standpoint, and you don't really need to worry too much about this until you actually face an issue. The different members at this point, I really have just two of them, node 1 and node 2, which is the nodes that are part of my failover cluster, and as you can see, the status of both of them are up. The next DMV that you want to look at is basically the cluster states. So here you notice that the cluster state doesn't really mean the cluster uptime, but just the fact that this replica is part of an availability group and it's joined to the cluster as a standalone. The next thing again here is the instance node mapping, which basically tells you which node is mapped to which resource group. Again, I've got just one resource group to which I've got two nodes, so not much happening here in this particular DMV either. The next one is the cluster network, which basically gives me an idea about what subnet my particular cluster nodes belong to. So I've got two nodes and I've got two subnet IPs mapped at the moment. The next one you're more likely to be using, the last two are some of the stuff that I think you'll be using pretty frequently. Now you got the replica ID and you got the group ID, and as you can see, I'm currently querying on the replica ID 830E, which is the unique identifier code for this particular instance, which is node 1, my primary. Operational state, it's online, and again it's connected. So a lot of quick information about the health of the environment by just querying the DMVs. Now this is again at the node level, so if you want if you have multiple replica nodes, or if you have multiple availability groups, you can just come here and click on HADR database replica states. This will give you individual replica groups, or basically database availability group information. So as you can see, I've got replica ID 83, and then I've got just one database associated with it, so one availability group. It's synchronized. And the good thing about this particular one is that it gives you information like the LSNs and the last time something was sent over. So it gives you a good idea about whether you're going to have any data loss as part of this process. Especially useful if you haven't set up any synchronized replication or synchronized commit mode between the two or three different replicas that you might have. So these are some of the DMVs that you want to be using frequently with always on. Now if you're not really comfortable with DMVs, or you're not really looking to go ahead and work with DMVs, then the good thing about always on is that it summarizes all this information as part of a dashboard, which is what you see here. So if you're really just looking to connect to the always on failover cluster and just look at the dashboard directly, you can just simply click the availability group and right click and choose dashboard. So you'll get a lot of the information that you're looking for here. So I've got the database MadWorks synchronized on both the primary as well as the secondary, and clicking on node 1 will give me some additional details about what's going on. In addition to this, you have a failover wizard, which is again something that you'd be really interested in using if you're looking for a fairly large amount of uptime. The idea is that occasionally when you're doing rolling updates, you might want to go ahead and use the failover wizard. So click failover wizard, press next. Obviously I'm on node 1 right now, so I want to fail over to node 2, and again failover readiness, no data loss, so just press next. I'm going to connect to node 2 using Windows authentication, which is basically what I want to do. As soon as I'm connected, I press next and then finish. At this point it starts manually failing over from node 1 to node 2, so you can see there are some basic checks that happen. Already you can see that AG1 is secondary over here, so after the failover it's gonna go ahead and migrate, and this particular node should come up as primary. Now while that's happening, one of the other things that you might be really interested in doing with always on is connecting to it using the always on availability group listeners. So the always on availability group listener that we have here is AG1 listener. And the idea here is that by using the listener, you can actually go ahead and make sure that you're always connected to the correct environment as far as always on is concerned. So let it go ahead and do the failover. And after that, I'll go ahead and show you how you can use the availability group listener to connect to the database, and how it'll automatically redirect you to either node 1 or node 2 depending on the type of connection that you have. As you can see now, the failover has completed successfully, and now that it's completed successfully, if I right click the always on availability group and just refresh it, I should see that it's the primary and it's failover and everything is up and running. So the last thing that I wanted to show you was how to connect to the always on availability group listener. As you can see, I've already connected using the listener, but you can also just go ahead and type in AG1 listener and then press connect. Because of my particular system's configuration, I occasionally get a timeout, but if I just keep trying hard enough, it does go through occasionally, like you can see here. Now the thing about the listener is that it automatically goes ahead and connects you to whichever instance is available, and depending on the type of connection that you're trying to establish, you'll see that sometimes you get connected to the primary and sometimes you get connected to the secondary. At this moment you can see that it doesn't really show a server name, it just shows the listener name over here and my connection. So if I just go ahead and use MadWorks, let's see which server I'm connected to at the moment. So I'm already connected to node number 2, so it's showing me node number 2 here, and that basically tells me that the connection that I'm gonna go ahead and set up here is with node number 2. Depending on if I've gone ahead and tried to configure for connecting with read intent, then occasionally the connection from AG1 listener, which is my listener service, will connect me to node 1. So that's pretty much all there is really about always on, and you can go ahead and play around with always on now that you've seen this video and get an idea about how this works. But for the most part, always on is fairly easy, and if you've worked with before, or especially if you work with the availability, if you work with the high availability solutions, you shouldn't have too much trouble understanding always on. I hope you've found this video useful, and we will continue the series on SQL Server with some additional videos on new features in SQL 2012. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.